Oh, and we're live. Well, hi.
Hello,
How are you
everyone.
guys? How's it going?
Good.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, great to see you again, guys, and welcome to everyone that's joining us here today as well. We're here at Privacy Tech is Sexy in Dennedy's, of course, and we're going to talk today about how we close our funding rounds. Today, here we have three amazing founders. Sorry to include me there. Perhaps to kick things off, we could introduce ourselves. Michelle, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Finneran Dennedy. I'm at Privacy Code Incorporated as its founding CEO.
Romain?
Yes, so Romain Gauthier, I'm a co-founder of Didomi. We are a European company specialized in consent and preference management.
Fantastic. And I'm Alex Frank. I'm a two-time founder, and currently I'm the CEO and co-founder at Privasee. We help companies, SMEs, with their GDPR compliance. Cool, great. So perhaps, since we're talking about funding rounds, it'd be nice to, maybe give us a TLDR on your most recent funding round and, what's your biggest challenge, or what was the biggest challenge then? And by the way, any questions along the way are more than welcome. Treat this as a Q&A, as well as us. We'll just go along with our topics as well. So yeah, Michelle, why don't you tell us? I think you have some exciting news, no?
Yeah, so we just closed. We got our final check. We got our final contract in the door, and we'll talk about this as we go along. In, I think, October, we got the final check in the bank hitting our account December for a $2 million angel round. Our target was 250,000. We ended up with 2 million. There's a story along with that too, but it's exciting. I think the valuations right now are a little bit kooky. You don't typically see a private angel round that large. But you are also seeing these larger rounds going forward. So I think let's start it there, I guess, and we can talk about the categories of the rounds and how they're being currently named. Although sometimes an A would be a C round in other contexts in economies. So, but that's where we're at. We are just barely coming out by name. We just produced our website today, privacycode.ai. So we're still not really even out of stealth. So we are probably the youngest of the bunch.
Super, that's fantastic. Congrats, Romain.
Thank you.
So at Didomi, we closed our most recent round last summer. It was a Series B of 40 million US dollars. So like a sizable check as well. So we got started in 2017. We were pretty much bootstrapped for the first 2 years, and then we raised a Series A end of 2019. So we are just following the normal track. Even though I agree with Michelle, I think the last month have been very exciting for B2B SaaS companies in particular. So we are very happy with this last round, and also happy to welcome US investors in our capital. So the round was led by a US VC called Elephant, and so as a European company, that's also a new step for us. That is also very exciting.
Wondering, Romain, how do you see? I'll tell you guys about my round in a second, but I think it's cool. I'd love to know, how is EU versus US investment? Because of course, I only know EU. I think Michelle kind of has been in the US mainly. So, how is it?
I think you can safely say it's different because I guess US companies are lucky to have such a vivid ecosystem for financing startups, and it's still true even though Europe is catching up fairly fast. But in particular, I think it's still easier to raise money in the US. There is also more competition, and therefore I think the main difference is that you also have more capable venture capitalists, so people who are more knowledgeable, who have more experience, who can also take more bets than others. And even though, as I said, Europe has really made tremendous progress over the past years, it's still true. And so for us, I think our history, during our history, we verified that. So my Series A was really hard to raise, not competitive, and took me a lot of time and energy. And while like the Series B got much easier and was like much more logical, because I think I was able to interest some US VC. So in a nutshell, that's I think the main the main difference that I see. Then there is something interesting with Privasee, is that for once I think Europe is more mature as a market for privacy tech, and therefore like being able to go after US VC with European metrics. I think that's one of the best combo you can get in privacy tech these days.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I mean, for us, we did we did $700,000 in April. We did it in 8 weeks. So you know, it's interesting because you do see some people that in 15 days, right, can raise millions and millions of it. You don't see that as much in Europe, and I think it's rare. You know, we were very lucky, but I think it's rare to see. And we did that as a pre-seed, and you know, originally I'm from Spain, and you know, the ecosystem there, doing a 700,000 pre-seed there is just crazy, right? But you know, what is pre-seed, seed, Series A at the end of the day, right? I mean, what is it?
I guess it all boils down to revenue. I think when you start having revenue, you go into a track that is well understood by most VC, and to be honest, I think the perspective on privacy tech is changing. But in the early days, I was kind of almost hiding the fact that I was like into privacy because of, for many reasons. We can get back to that later. But I guess in the early days, I was more focused on presenting myself as like a pure SaaS business with an enterprise focus and a direct go-to-market. And so to check all the boxes that VC were understanding and showing the adequate metrics to convince them. But most of like the VC were excited about that, and therefore ignored the privacy part. I think now you can go after money and show that you're a privacy tech, and that will capture attention, which is, I think, something that is fairly new and very exciting for our category, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive in here because it's you know, the cash is always greener. You used to think it was the grass, but now the cash is always greener. It's actually interesting to me because I've been, well, there's a few things that are different other than my location. I'm also a female. That will add 6 to 9 months onto your raise if you're coming in as female founders. Statistically proven, we went from about 3% of the total PE spend down to about 2% during the pandemic. And we're sharing that 2% of funding in an all-female founder set with, you know, tampons and leggings. So I sell enterprise software. I've spent over 30 years as a practitioner and years before that as a New York City IP litigator. So I'm coming in as a more mature founder. I'm coming in as someone who's lived all the problems that I've had. So it was a bit of a shock to go from the C-suite and then walk into VCs, most of whom are tragically young, and they're looking for a thing. They're looking for some sort of a formulaic thing, and enterprise is a long, slow build. So thing number one, I would say to other entrepreneurs, if you're going after consumer, if you're going after SMB, if you're going after a feature and your end of life is to be bought, that's a very different approach than if you're going in with foundational technology for a slow build. You're going to have to emphasize different advantages, and you're going after a different pot of gold. So the other piece of advice I would give to people, because I've been on the M&A side of this, usually I'm buying these young companies as feature. So I have a lot of experience with both sides of the pond. There's more structure, there's more buyers in the US because operationally we've been doing privacy for decades longer than the Europeans. It's been a paper process issue. You get a DPO, you fill out the form, you talk to the unions, but you hadn't really dug into the data center outside of really the research. So some of the homomorphic encryption stuff. That said, yes, John Geverts, I said tragically young because we're old. So John is the CPO from Visa, who's recently, he says he's retired, but he's not, that's not true. But the reality is it's all about anything else that you're selling as a leader of your new young business. You got to find the right fit. You got to find the right formula. You got to find the right partner. And then you have to have volume, because at the end of the day, you might take 2 weeks if you find the right guy. It might take you 9 months until you find someone who understands your investment thesis. And you're not coming because your thing is cool. You're coming because you're going to make somebody else a lot of money.
I couldn't agree more. Like I think that's very well put. It's a clear like way to describe our history. I think as well. And so the day we were able to demonstrate that we could generate serious revenue with large enterprise clients, I think everything changed, and then like privacy was no longer an issue or even like a topic. It was we were just interesting, and I think that's what you dream of in the early days as a founder, and so like the fastest you go there, I think the better you are as a founder.
Yeah, and they loved Alex because he's done it before. You know the formula, you know how to do it. And so they're loving that. So the early investor, before you've got your product built, is investing in Alex. They're investing in Romain. They're investing in Michelle and my co-founder. So that's the first investment. And then, you know, as Romain is talking about, I mean, what you want to do is get to the B route, where you're looking at the financials. And now you're really understanding what is the profit margin. If you're a SaaS company, do you know about the 3-3-2 rule? I did not. The 3-3-2 rule means you're going to triple your business for 2 years in a row, and then you're going to start doubling your business. That's the metric that every SaaS founder every SaaS PE firm that's going to want to follow you through, and you do want them to follow with you onto each successive round. You want to follow those rules. So understanding the language of investment, it's separate from privacy. Understanding that some people don't use the word privacy as a functional operational unit. They think of it as a policy, as something light and fluffy. For them, you're really going to talk about the operational aspects and the outcomes and the business rewards that your product or service is going to bring.
I mean, to an extent as well, I think, you know, you're super right there. There's a steep learning curve, I think, with, you know, everything term sheet, right? Which at the end is everything investment-wise, especially if it's the first time you're raising funds. But I also think that, you know, as you say, you know, when you arrive onto an investor or, you know, VC, angel, or whatever it is, right? At the end of the day, there's a big component of education, in the sense that, you know, you need to explain to them, as you say, you know, what is privacy? Some people think that it stops at a privacy policy, right? And, you know, well, that's what most people may interact with or know about, but we could talk for hours and hours and hours about what privacy is. But also, you know, how do you communicate to the investor what is it that you do, right? Because I think fundamentally our businesses do something very, very different right here on this call, right? But to some investors, we might be on the same bucket, right? And from a technological standpoint, from a processes standpoint, you know, from, you know, the articles and the different data protection regulation standpoint, we're completely different. And I think that there's also something to be said, right? That this is still an emerging space, and it's fantastic that we can call it privacy tech, right? Because, you know, a year ago, you were saying B2B SaaS technology company, right? And today we're able to say that. I think that's fantastic as well.
I agree. I think there has been a lot of education, and I don't know who's responsible for that. So, like, my take is that I think Bessemer did a pretty good job at defining the privacy tech category fairly early in our history. I think when they started investing in Big ID. But I think that article did a great job for privacy in general, and to me, like that's some form of reference, and I believe that's where like people started to see a bit like for other large investment buckets how privacy could be shaped and driven by like specific investment and like a best of breed approach. So I believe that has been a very interesting moment in privacy tech history to have this article. And then I believe also like the likes of Gartner, Forrester have also been doing a good job at categorizing the space more from an enterprise standpoint. But I think like both combined have helped us a lot over the years. And so I think now it's becoming obvious to a lot of people that privacy is just like cybersecurity. It's an exciting new space where like tech will reshape a lot of things, and so now it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to understate the obvious. If you found yourself at TROPT, you probably know about the report, but I totally agree that Bessemer had a great first stab at this. And I think FPF did a decent job. There's a kind of the phone book of IAPP that talks about like the category of everyone who wants to call themselves PrivTech. But of course, you know, the rise of privacy technology, what I loved about their report, there it is, cover your ears so you don't get too big headed. I like that the rise of privacy tech took a business outcomes approach. At the end of the day, we're not here to be another category in a phone book. We're here to solve business problems and create technology that actually gets people's pain as decreased as possible and hopefully increases their ability and facility to use data in a very ethical way. So I agree with you. I love the Bessemer report. I actually put it in my pitch deck to say this is what people think. The other tricky thing I think and I ask back to my co-panelists here is when you are first, second, or even third in category, every VC will ask you, who is your competitor? And the answer that you cannot say is no one, I'm so new, this is so new, even if it's new. So I think it's really important, especially in this community, to understand what is the business outcome. And if you don't have someone who's doing exactly what you're doing, I suggest to you that you talk about share of wallet as being your competitors, because the venture people simply won't buy that nothing new is really new under the sun.
That's actually, that's a slide that I removed whilst we're doing our raise because I would so many questions from investors that really didn't understand the space that, it's something that I prefer to take on a longer meeting and really dive into it deeper later on rather than the first initial kind of like short deck. Because as you say, especially, perhaps the enterprise space, as you said, with, the quadrants and stuff like that, we do get, a bit more categorization. But the SME space, you can choose your category in a way, and everyone can choose theirs as well, right? And so yeah, but it does make sense that everything gets defined at enterprise and then slowly funnels down. We saw it with security, right? I think, privacy is going to follow as well. So yeah, but I think that's an interesting thing that you say there, that it is about sharing, the wallet, as you said, or the market in a way. And at least that's how I see it. I always try to praise my direct competitors because, listen, there's so many, for good and for bad, there's so many companies that need what we do, right? That in a way, one alone can't do it, right? And although some are trying to do it alone, let's just say that it's complicated as well.
It's silly. You're being kind. It's silly. We heard somebody made a comment this morning on a panel that there will be one tool and one thing. There's not one tool for your HR department. There's not one tool for your security. There's not one tool for your medical care. There will be specialization. Right now, yes, we want one maybe storefront or brand eventually to have all these technological skills, but looking at John Gevert's sage advice here is don't just theorize that you're going to solve some sort of a problem. Show me how you're going to do it. Show me that it works. Show me that it makes sense. Show me that I can afford it, and show me somehow that it's sustainable. And if we show that to people like John, they'll talk to the investors on our behalf, and that may or not have happened in this case.
Yeah, I think like the early leaders of the privacy space are like doing great service to the rest of the space, because at the end of the day, I think they are financing the evangelization, the education of the market. And now we face for a lot of personas much more mature buyers, people who know exactly what they want. They've like tested a lot. They've had a first contract with another vendor, and now they realize what is their true problem. And so I guess this early like stage of the privacy tech category is, I think, doing a great service for people who specialize, who stay focused, and yeah, I really like the way this is developing, because I think it's just following the tracks of every other tech categories before us, where like focus and specialization have always won the game, and so I guess it's yeah, we are just not any different from other tech categories.
I'm going to push a question back to you because you're furthest along the path, Romain, about your buyer persona. How early did you develop it? How did you have to pivot? What's your thought about who's the buyer? I always hear, and I was the same one saying, I don't have any budget myself as a chief privacy officer. I had to share that paycheck with someone else when I wanted to buy a tech tool. What do you think about buyer persona? And I'll ask Alex the same question.
That's a great question, because in the early days when I made like the assessment before starting Didomi, okay, who's going to buy from me? And I thought that the data protection officer would be the main buyer, because I had these figures in mind that there were going to be 80,000 new data protection officers hired with GDPR. And therefore, like, they would need to be equipped somehow, and that would open up a lot of budgets. And started with this idea, and quickly realized that for us, for consent and preference management, the people who have the most reason to buy from us are more to be found on the marketing side, and for some use cases, even like more specifically on the advertising side, on the CRM side. And so we were better off like convincing these people. And so our pitch has always been to link what we do, so consent, with business outcomes, with revenue, and to show the relationship between like getting a consent from a customer and how this will translate into the ability to monetize data, to like just process personal data, to personalize, to measure, and so on and so forth. And that paid off, and that allowed us to first target the right personas, the ones with budget, and also the ones that were also more motivated than DPOs to buy from us, and more sensitive to this idea of a value that we were selling them.
I mean, for us, I love to know that down the road, Romain, it's so clear. For us, we've pivoted.
It's still very difficult to get there, and we've cried a lot before getting there. So
yeah, the value of despair is very long and very large, and you always hope that your runway is going to sustain that. For us, we work with SMEs and mid-market companies, and some of the companies that we work with don't even have a DPO, although I understand that in your case it's not the sense, but we deal with legal counsels, but sometimes it's directly with the CEO or the CFO, sometimes it's the CTO as well. So for us, we're still trying to really iterate on that persona, and we're doing tests still, and I think it's something that you keep on doing all the time, because when you identify one persona, you don't want to identify another one to capture more revenue, right, and to have other revenue streams. So definitely, I think that for the privacy space, it's a difficult one to figure out, essentially because the number of experts, right, that are placed already in companies is typically low, and the buy-in is also really low, and the perception that compliance needs to get done with one click, fully automated, and we need to forget until next year, right? That's really the perception that is really difficult and is ingrained on people's mind. And even from a consumer standpoint, that's not how privacy works at all, right? But even at companies are still, or we see that some companies get it straight away, and others are still in this ingrained method of saying, almost like we're developing our terms and conditions, right? But it's really not the same thing.
Yeah, I like Alex. Since you guys are both out, you can out yourselves. How did you pick? So you're mid-market, and you're in that always talked about pain point of data mapping. How did you pick your market as mid SMB? So you're doing S as well as medium, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we felt it firsthand when we started our previous company. So me and my co-founder, we founded a company about sharing data conditionally. We actually wrote a new encryption protocol that will allow us to share data conditionally. We want to change the paradigm, where companies don't hold their data, but really, something else would hold that data, like a proxy, and you could share it. And there, when we started working towards becoming GDPR compliant with that previous company, we realized that we were out of money, right, by hiring consultants. And we're like, listen, as an SME, you probably don't need a 10-people team, right, to just manage your data protection. And that's what really inspired us to go there. So really, it's about kind of like our vision and our mission for us intrinsically, in order to make sure that in a way we allow for everyone to have access to take care of their customers' data, and that the customers of our customers have their data treated in the same way as Romain's customers, or I guess your customers as well.
Yeah, one of your buyers is on the line. I can't out either one of you, but you know who you are, buyer. Talk to Alex. And Alex, when you get a new deal out of send Mama a little bit of commission. It's fine. We have to help each other out in the privacy tech world. But
exactly.
We need to understand like who's SMB, who's got them automated, and I'll put it in bunny quotes. None of your solutions are automated. It's adorable, but yes. The things that are easier for SMB to handle, the things that are closer to helping our marketers produce better information. In our case, we're helping the developers and the infrastructure people, very large enterprise. Understanding who we are, I think, was a big part of how we actually achieved our raise. And it was like everything else, like they always say in tech, it's first blood. You get to that first check and then everybody else starts coming in. How did you draw first blood?
We focused on one specific industry. So we focused on publishers and media, and dug really deep in this industry. So in France, for instance, we have 80 of the top 100 media and publishers. So we dominate now this. But
no one's inviting you to Cannes.
We applied sufficient focus in the early days. And so I think the temptation is really high to chase everything you can. I think you should do exactly the opposite. Start with the first win and just iterate around this first win. It's much easier and will go much faster. But the temptation to go outside of this early wins is very high. So you need to resist. And I think that's what we did fairly well, because we got traction, and then the rest follows logically. But I guess this early focus on one industry, so one set of use cases that we knew we could solve and get our very happy customers, a lot of referrals, strong reference. Also, we chose media and publishers because it's very visible. So they are very large media outlets. So everybody know the name, know the logo. So it's very convenient to use in your pitch. At the same time, it's easier to get them than other large enterprise clients. And so that explains a lot of why we decided to do that. And yeah, maybe there are other alternative strategies, but I guess you need to stay focused on something that you know and will master fast.
I totally agree. And Romain, you're not alone. Yeah, it's so difficult to focus, right, on one single thing when slight use cases, modified use cases of your use case come along, and they seem like a good business opportunity that can bump, your MRR significantly, and then, all of a sudden you're there and you're doing that, and all of a sudden, you realize that was not the way. I think we've all been there as founders, and if you haven't, well, that's great. I think you're ahead of the rest. But it's been the case for us. But for us, it comes, from a series of iterations in customer development. Really, we came up with a proposition. Now, for better or for worse, we are technical founders, which means we can code. That's good because it means it brings your cost down. Terrible because it means you actually code stuff instead of bootstrapping stuff, and that's can also be really, really risky. But for us, it was a matter of we proposed something, right? What do you call MVP or even pre-MVP, and then tested it, and we're like, well, this and this and this and this is going against the tide. Let's change it. again, and so on and so forth. And that's what really, after doing it a couple of times, you start to see, that all of a sudden people arrive, they get their data mapping, their core documents done, they're happy, and that's how you can keep going. And from there on, I think it's similar. It's like the referrals are very important at the start, right? And how do you create that? So yeah, and I think when we were raising around, most of the people that we were working on came from referrals. We also did put a lot of time in taking care of those customers, but at the end, I think it pays off, because at the end, at scale, you can do it's not so much about a people business, I think, but when you're starting, getting that connection and that relationship, I think is crucial, right? So yeah, that's how it was for us. I'm really interested to see how it goes for you, Michelle.
Me too. We've just got our first couple customers on the platform, and thank God I have a technical founder who is absolutely precise. But you're absolutely right. When you are coding, sometimes I'm like, Christy, it's done. It's done, woman. It's done. She's in the audience now, and she's like, it's not done yet. So I think that focus thing is really important. And for us, it's tricky because you're always asked, what is your vertical? And sometimes it makes sense, like you're doing medical data, and so it's there, or you're doing media there. For us, it's very large enterprise. It's people who actually can employ developer teams or IT teams that are curating and passing information across the membrane, if you will, of the standard corporation, or people that have a Schrems problem. We all have a Schrems problem. So we are more problem focused, and we're focused on, and this is where I think we got distracted for a little bit, was being asked to do things like open source communities. I'm not native to the open source community. I've sold into them, I've contracted into them for decades, but if we start with that open source methodology, it's very different than a soup to nuts, highly secure enterprise solution, which is what we ultimately built. I say we, Christy and her team. But I think that was a big deal. And I think in finding investors, it's really interesting, because I actually was talking to a group of VCs last night, and one of them finally said the unsaid thing, which is, they always say that you raise money by creating relationships, create relationship. That VC is not in it to like go to dinner and have cocktails with you. That VC is there so that they can prove a multiple of the investment to show to their limited partners who are their customers. So we really look at the VCs limiteds, who's influencing the buys and who is the boss of the VCs themselves. And then what is their thesis? Do they understand an enterprise thesis? If they don't, we leave. Because I guess the other piece, and this is, I'll ask as a question, is I had hundreds of calls that were like, Michelle, can we just pick your brains? Coming from people who purported to be investors. They weren't picking my brains. They were pickpocketing my brains, because they had no interest in investing in us at all, but they wanted to know what the privacy tech market is, or they wanted me to intro them to people like Keith and Ray, who you met this morning, these large CPOs, or John. I'm not going to call my privacy officer friends and walk you in the door unannounced. So how do you avoid having your brain pickpocketed, and how do you say no fast?
I think the key is to say no.
Yeah.
And because saying no raises interest, and it's really hard to do, but you're right. I think one tactic that I do, I'm not very proud of it, but I stopped answering emails from VC because after a while they target you, because they have like trackers on the web, and so they see like we power 200,000 websites on the web, so we are now like a bit visible, and so they are also tracking the number of employees you have on LinkedIn, and so all of a sudden you have associates, like even directors, who are like emailing you and asking for a meeting. At first, I was really really happy about it. I was flattered, but very soon I realized it was such a waste of time, because when you raise fund, you do only that, and you should do that for a very limited period of time in a very constrained manner. And so, like, getting all distracted all the time by investors is a huge waste of time. So now I politely decline, and I have a template for that, or for some I just don't answer, and that raises interest. It's brutal, and I'm not really proud of about that, but I think it works, and it's a good way to fight getting a pickpocket by VCs.
I totally agree there, because there's this expression we have in Spain. It's like rice on the low, where you leave the rice cooking on the low, right? This is something that I've started doing with some investors that just outreach you for, quick catch up. And you're like, well, I'm not raising right now. And if you put it on the rise on the low, normally they come back 1, 2, 3 more times, wanting to set up that call, right? And so I think that, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's totally right. You're essentially creating demand for yourself, which is great. Another thing that I did is I only have 30-minute calls and 50-minute calls that can be booked on my calendar. It's like low priority ones, which I can just send a link. Looks exactly like, just a normal calendar, but they'll just never know. And that's like, whatever, you'd give that set time somewhere else. But I also like to ask, hey, this is the minimum ticket that we're doing. Is this something you can do? Always in the first call, not asking for their investment, of course, but also probing that, decision-making, kind of like, where's their skin in the game in this? That's worked quite well for us. But yeah, I think there's nothing worse than having investors just asking for your time for the sake of it. And as Romain said, keeping the narrative clear, keeping the deck always completely up to date all the time when you're a 4-people team, for us is next to impossible. I don't know about you, Michelle.
Yeah, we're always iterating, and you're absolutely right. And I think I want to call out what Mel said in the comments here, which is we've experienced, and I learned these things that you guys are experienced with the hard way. So hopefully anyone who's listening, who's in that raising round, will listen intently to this. But Mel's absolutely right. There are VCs who are vulture VCs, and I've had this happen where they call you and they want to get as much of your idea because they've invested in the stinker. And they want to make that stinker make money. And so they'll take some of your ideas, your IPs, even your trademarks, and you'll see the filings happen right after you meet with these turkeys. It's scummy. What are you going to do? You're raising money right now. You're not going to go off and go after some trade secret. So be careful who you talk to, be careful how you talk to them, and be aware that some VCs do not have the most ethical practices of all.
I haven't encountered that, but maybe because I didn't speak so much with the US VCs up until we were mature. But up until now, I had the opposite in mind. So in the early days, share your idea with as much people as possible, and because it's just an idea, and for most parts, what will make you successful is execution. So it's very likely that your idea is not original at all, and tons of people out there have had this exact same idea, and so I guess it's I hear that it could be risky, but for me that wasn't my experience, and the ability for people to focus on something and execute it properly is fairly rare, and VCs are after that.
Yeah,
especially if you carry some experience. I guess they will bet on you rather than on the next one.
Yeah, that's a good refinement, because you're 100% right. I don't mean raw ideas. It's all about the execution. But if you have if you have copy, if you have colors, if you have whatever, you'll be amazed at what people think that they're going to steal to get ahead. At the end of the day, there's nothing that's going to be better for them in privacy engineering than Christy Edwards and me. So I'm not worried about that. But they will suck your time, and they will try to knock off things, and just be wary of that. But from the raw idea perspective, Romain, I could not agree more. people are asking me what I'm building. Go read my textbook. I published it in 2014. I've been talking about the principles. I've taught a grad class in what we're building. I'm not a secret. How we're going to execute on it, that's a little different, harder to catch.
No, but I learned the whole IP thing in the US the hard way. We got sued by a patent troll after 2 years of existence, while we were not financed at all, so we were bootstrapped. So that's where I cried, because I had to give up my salary for a couple of months to pay off lawyers in the US. So no, I'm sure it exists, and yeah, I think that's clearly a shame, but yeah, for the ID part, I believe you're always better off sharing it with as many people as you can. That includes VC if you control that correctly.
Yeah, and Christy, my co-founder, has a very good comment. Like, if they don't write first checks, if they've never written first checks, they're probably not going to write your first check. So do your homework, just like you do for your first customers. Make sure you're doing that homework on the VCs too.
Absolutely right. That's before I talk, I always ask them to introduce themselves and explain me exactly at which stage they invest, in which company they have invested, and I don't talk until I've learned that. So if I don't fall in their category, I just say apologize and just leave, because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and sometimes they will probe you to really confirm an investment, or as Michelle said, trying to get ideas to understand how one of their portfolio companies may evolve or could target other segments in the market, even if they're not in technology, or they're perhaps in the legal tech space or whatever it is. So yeah, I agree there. It has happened to us that you see the portfolio later on and you get all excited because they seem really excited about your product, and well, you can't do the homework for every single call when you're raising, because likely you're having a lot of them, right? But at some point that happens, and you're like, well, that's deceiving, because all of a sudden it's not so much about giving your ideas, right? I agree here with what you guys are saying. Listen, ideas are for you to take. The graveyard is full of ideas as well. What matters is execution. And if you want to take my IP, well, probably means that my IP wasn't good enough, right? At least in the SaaS software space, because at the end of the day, how do you patent that? You can write the line of code one way or another. So yeah, but at the end of the day, I agree that ideas are worth nothing, but also you have to be wary, because sometimes they're not in there for you, and it's sometimes difficult to master or to learn when that is.
Yeah, I think that's right. We haven't gotten any questions. We only have a few minutes left on our time clock here, so hey people, we'll just keep going
all night long. Yeah, I was going to add that one thing that I really appreciated with my Series B is the ability to get some advisor next to me. And so the first thing they did was to establish a list of conflicted VC. And so I think that saved me a lot of time and energy, and so very interesting list, by the way, because it's a list that is hard to produce. So you need to keep track of everything, and that's not easy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of money laying around on the street, but you're also seeing people like $20 million for yet another privacy vault. There's a lot of garbage. I'm sorry if you're a privacy vault purveyor. I'm sure there's better than others out there in the world.
They pop up every year,
every year, and you'll see
all run on AWS, KMS, yeah.
And you're looking at these investors going, what are you doing? You can't get discouraged by that. You just have to say, here's my investment philosophy, and here's what I'm determined to go build. And you cannot look at the FOMO, what other people are getting in their raises. You just can't, or you won't make it.
Raises and valuations, I always say they're fantastic for the news outlet, right? But I want to see the term sheet. If your company is worth 5 billion, but you're out the door tomorrow with no equity, or with a dilution that is crazy, no control, and
This was a tip, actually. It was interesting because I laugh because you guys are like, oh, you're in the US. Well, we've got a Canadian big ticket. We've got Pacific Northwest. We've got Silicon Valley, and we've got New York City. All of those investment philosophies are very, very different. And so Pac Northwest is a slow, they are very cautious. They're more like a bank. They want lower valuations. New York is like, that's a good idea. Bada bing, bada boom, get it done. So you got to figure out like, what's your region? What's their tolerance for risk? And especially in early stage, you got to figure out what that valuation is with an eye to investing without giving away too much money too soon. Christy had a good question as per usual. What are the biggest differences between early raises versus Series A or B, since you guys are A and B?
I can talk for for B. It's just that you are just scaling your product, so you can demonstrate that you can replicate growth in a controlled fashion. And for SaaS, it's as Michel correctly pointed out, it's a very well understood world where you need to speak the language. So Series B in Europe is above 300,000 euros of monthly recurring revenue. So I think it's slightly around $5 million in ARR. But that's depending on your growth. So if you triple, that's you're on the right track. As long as you maintain like hyper growth, you're good to go.
Yeah, and then the stats,
run, accelerate, and shorten.
And if you're a diverse founder, that's double. So from the stats, women and people of color, you have to have 10 million ARR to get to B. Sorry, but that's the game.
I can't talk about that because I think we don't. From a European perspective, we don't have this.
You do.
This way of looking at things, but
your money says different. So the stats.
I'm not an investor but probably investors are probably like behaving like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's like, I'm not talking about the social issue. I'm talking about the numbers. So you look at the numbers and who invests and how. Prepare yourself if you're a diverse founder to get to 10 million ARR for B, and don't be butthurt if someone else is getting something different. This is the game today. I'd love to change the game. This is the game today. Look at the numbers. They're critical.
It's a shame. And I think we can all agree on that.
Yes.
I think numbers should be the best equalizer of everything. And if not, that shows like, I think that investors are still
you can't change it
behind.
It won't be changed because this has been a women-led business. So I'm very, very bullish on the market, but I am also like, this is about how to raise money. And so I think if you raise money with stars in your eyes, you will fail. So understand who your audience is, understand what your performance metrics have to be. And that's not a sexist statement, that's just data driven. I hope that changes. I hope that the money's 50-50 and that's all great, but know your audience, kids. It sounds so cynical, but it's just numbers.
Yeah. Dave has a good question. I think that the highlight, well, the question is, when trying to pre-seed, how did you motivate yourselves in the face of the amount of time it took? Do you ever question whether you had a practical business at all? I think that's something that you question, many, many times, right? Perhaps not you, Romain, anymore. But
I did like in the early days, every day, every night, especially every night. And no, you're right. It's the hardest part, and by far, and only very few people get through it. So it's not like sexy and sorry for the title of the show, but it's hard and painful, and everybody should realize that. And there is a lot of like sexiness about entrepreneurship in general, but to be honest, it comes with a huge cost.
Yeah, and if it's something that's already done and known, then you're not an entrepreneur. So if you're not waking up with cold sweats and wondering like, oh my God, what am I doing? Then you're in the wrong town.
Totally. I mean, my co-founder knows firsthand. Sometimes it's just I just freak out, and we need to get back to basics, because I'm like, but if this doesn't work, then this, and it's something that's totally normal and part of the journey as well. And also why the highs are so high, right? I just think, yeah, one day everything, you're the worst company in the market. The next day you're number one, next year we are, 10 billion valuation, right? So yeah, I think
that part doesn't stop after after time. So highs are still very high and get higher, but the lows are even more frightening because now you can break things. I have 160 people working for Didomi, so now my decisions are not only me and my family. It's a lot of people depend on us taking the right course. So I think that's where the stress augments over time.
It's totally true. And this is not a game for the faint of heart at all. I mean, it reminds me closest to like in 2008, like when you have to lay off 35,000 people and you're sending 35,000 people home to their families to say, it's 2008. It's a technical, financial, nuclear employment winter. And I'm going to lay you off now. Like that's the level of feeling that this reminds me of, living through those days. So you do have to prepare yourself. You have to take care of yourself, and you should partner up with people like Romain and Alex and myself who are doing this. We don't have any time, but we will love you from afar.
I give my time to any founder that was raising Michelle.
I'm tongue in cheek. I totally think we need to rely on each other. And I will send you this customer, which is going to be a good customer for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's, as tough as it is, at the same time, there's this intrinsic love that you have for another founder. It doesn't matter if they're your direct competitor or not. I think we can all relate. We've all been there at different stages, right? And it's a tough mentally. It takes a cost as well on family, friends, and other stuff outside of work. You prioritize work as your number one, and that has costs elsewhere. So I think that that's one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship is being able to, sit with founders like you, and we exactly know, we could talk for hours because we understand what we're going through each other, right? And can help each other. And that's the best thing, the people I think here. Yeah.
I think we got the hook from Lourdes 10 minutes ago. So final thoughts, you guys. I mean, I love that as a final thought. Let's watch out for each other, but final thoughts.
Agreed. I think that's a great conclusion.
Yeah, thank you for your time, guys. It's been amazing. I loved our initial call as well. Love this one too. It's been a pleasure to share today with you guys. So thank you for being here, and the rest as well, everyone watching us.
Yeah, thank you guys. And if you need some consent,
thanks, everyone.
If you need mapping, if you need data engineering, call these bitches.
Right.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.